fam? As you might already know, I did get approved for the Taiwan Gold Card through the Culture and Arts category. I've got to say honestly, towards the end of that, right before I was notified, I was really just expecting a rejection. You know, as each week passed, my confidence level was diving. It wasn't even in my mind anymore. And then when I was bathing the kids, something dinged on my phone and I happened to look at it, and it was an email from the Taiwanese Gold Card committee. And it's just funny because what they actually say if you are accepted, it just says go submit your passport to the embassy, basically. And so that's what it said. There's like no fanfare. And I looked at it, half of the emails in Chinese, half of it is in English, and I was just thinking, it seems like I got accepted. So I had to show it to my wife. So in this video, I'm just going to try to shed some light on what the Gold Card Committee, I guess the Ministry of Culture, is looking for in the Gold Card Culture and Arts category. I think it's still very opaque, very vague, but at least I can provide one more data point and a little bit of specificity on at least what I did that got me approved. There's already been, a handful of people who reached out to me to ask me about this, so I'm gonna make a video and pretty much go through all those details. So first of all, I wanna give a shout out and thank you to Paul Whiteley. He is an actor and singer in musical theater, presenter, teacher, and he is a Gold Card holder. Awesome guy, really generous with his time. And when he found out that I was somebody interested in pursuing the same category, he hopped on a call with me and sent me his entire application, and kind of went through everything that he provided and documented for the Ministry of Culture. And so thanks, Paul, for your generosity and your kindness. So in talking to Paul, he had some advice for me, and he also gave me a lot of confidence in knowing that somebody with a similar background, of course, I personally think that Paul's resume is much stronger than mine, but at least we come from similar backgrounds. And so somebody who isn't like world famous was able to get it and be very successful with the Gold Card, and it gave me confidence that I'd at least stand a chance. So the number one advice that Paul gave me that he really tried to pound into my consciousness was that I should just throw everything in the kitchen sink into my application and give the Ministry of Culture like a whole lot to chew on. As I'll get to, I didn't actually follow his advice. I felt a little self-conscious and insecure about some of those things that I might have included, so I actually cut out a lot of the things that he had suggested. But one of the key things, which ended up being the crux of my application, I'd say, is he said, get letters of recommendation. And that's what I did. I tried to find the strongest letters of recommendation I could get, and that's what I kind of built my application around. So first of all, if you're applying for culture and arts, you have very little to go on. They basically, what they ask for when you apply is anything. They want you to list any like international awards you've won, things like that. But if you don't have any of those, there's really nothing that they prompt you for. And so I approached this because of Paul. I approached this as sort of like a job application. I provided a cover letter. I provided a CV or resume that was tailored specifically to Taiwan and the arts community. And then I provided 4 letters of recommendation that I feel piece together a very strong story for what I have done and what I will be able to do in Taiwan. But that was it. That's all I included. So it was a very bare bones application. And so as I sat there waiting for 2 months, I was thinking either they are going to think that this is really ballsy and that this person must be like really awesome to like submit this application, just say, here, this is me, nothing deep, just like, look at it. Obviously, I'm good enough to be accepted. Either that, or they're just gonna reject me because it's like, what the heck is this? and the main thing that I was concerned with was the fact that those 6 documents that I provided as my full application didn't really include anything of substance. It was like it was things that I was saying to the committee about why I would be good, but it's just me talking, right? It's just an essay. And then letters of recommendation from people I know who are just gonna like talk me up. And for all they know, like these are all electronic. I could just be making these letters up myself and then just saying, here's what people are saying about me. And that was my entire package. I had one link on my CV. Again, it's all electronic. I just had one link to 2 songs that I produced, and that was it. That was the only thing that was like an example of my work. So in hindsight, I was starting to get really nervous, like, man, I should have included a lot more. I should have put in my music degrees, blah. But anyway, I'm going to get to what each thing was in my application. So we're going to go over details of each of those things. The first thing was that cover letter that I mentioned. It was 1 page, and I pretty much went over 3 main ideas in that cover letter. So the first thing was I talked about my credentials, and I included a few nuggets that weren't part of my CV. Just sort of in a narrative form, I mentioned the fact that I had toured with an orchestra in Taiwan as the associate concertmaster. It was something that everything I said was true, but I kind of talked it up a little bit more. Yeah, so it was my past credentials was the first thing in my cover letter. The second important thing that I mentioned was why I want to live in Taiwan. So showing my passion for Taiwan, showing why it would make sense for me and my family to move there and build a life there. And then the third thing was what I plan to do in music in the Taiwanese community. So I showed that I had already had connections. I had already begun the legwork of establishing what it was that I planned to do and how I would contribute. All right, so I lied earlier about my CV. It's actually 1.5 pages. I tried to squeeze it into 1 page, but I just felt like everything was too important, and so I kept everything in there as it was. I had a purpose statement, again, designed to show sort of ability to adapt and assimilate into Taiwanese culture, as well as painting a picture of how I already planned to contribute to the music scene in Taiwan. I had sort of the highlights for myself as a teacher, as a performer, and as a judge in music. They do mention if you are an adjudicator for international competitions, and that's a way to automatically get the gold card. And certainly I've never judged on that level, but I just figured including my judging experience would be good. Because of that, I was also an adjunct music professor for 3 semesters, and so I put that in there. It was a short time, but I think that's a significant credential to be a college professor, right? I had those 2 songs that I produced, including one that was written and performed by me. Another key piece is my extensive arts management, arts administration history. I served as the general manager for an organization that is fairly well known in the classical music scene in the US. So again, and I feel like this is gonna be true for a lot of people, it's something that's not a shining star that's gonna just get you in automatically, because there's very few of those, but it's something that is strong enough that if you can paint it in the right light, it'll really, really resonate. I mentioned this arts festival that I founded, but it only lasted for 1 year, and then I moved away from Jacksonville. But it is something that I'm proud of. I received a large grant to launch this festival in Jacksonville, and so talk about that as well. And then I gave sort of my background in education and training, a bachelor's of music and master's of music, played in multiple orchestras, and my leadership positions in those orchestras. So that was my CV. So my first letter of recommendation, I'm just going to order these in I guess my personal perceived order of importance. My primary letter of recommendation came from my studio professor for my master's degree at Northwestern University, Professor Alan Chow. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this for me. And he I'm going to first say that the thing about these letters of rec, it was just a massive ego boost. It was something that really lifted me up in the middle of the pandemic, kind of to go back in time to my past and see what these people were willing to say and vouch for me. It was such a humongous ego boost. And honestly, when I reached out to Professor Chow, I didn't even know if he would do it for me. I was certainly not among his best students by any means. And I marveled at the letter that he wrote for me. It was really eye-opening and heartfelt, so thank you for that letter. And one other thing to mention about him, it probably helped me, was that I did study with him at Northwestern, and Northwestern, while it's a great school, great music program, I think that in China and Taiwan and that region of the world, they hold Northwestern in an even higher regard. At least back when I was there, that's what I noticed. They really held Northwestern in an even higher regard than what it was at the time, or it is. It is a great school. It's kind of like a second tier right from the top. So it's still an elite music program, but not super elite. Maybe I had benefited from the fact that in China and Taiwan, they have this reverence and higher regard for Northwestern. But on top of that, Professor Chow is no longer at Northwestern. He's actually teaching at Eastman, which is the elite of the elite. So now, his name and his title is so strong, extremely strong. He's one of the best known pedagogues in classical piano. And And he's Taiwanese American, so he doesn't have any ties, any really close ties to Taiwan, as far as I know. I did ask him about that. He has no connection at all to the Ministry of Culture, unfortunately. But they probably do know who he is, and there is some familiarity with him. I think overall that helped me a lot, and that was what I was thinking was my key piece of my application. My second most important letter of rec came from the executive director and founder of the Ritz Chamber Music Society, where I worked as general manager for many years. And I knew that he was going to write me a great recommendation. He loves me, has loved me. We're extremely close. I even thought he was gonna ask me to write it myself, and then he just signed it. But actually he wrote it, and he wrote it really, really, really well. And I'm glad that, Terrence, I'm really glad that you wrote it yourself, because it was really nice and heartwarming to see what you had to say. Anyway, again, another ego boost, just basically speaking extremely glowingly about me and the things that I did for the organization. Also talked up the organization itself to kind of make them aware of how, the accolades and the history of this chamber ensemble, and sort of let them know that this is the kind of knowledge and experience that I would be bringing to Taiwan. So the third letter of rec came from a friend of mine from college who I played a little bit of music with here and there. We're close friends. And he is a very talented singer-songwriter in his own right, and he's been living in Taipei for going on 5 years now, I believe. And he works as an English teacher, but he also performs a lot in the Taipei music scene. So he's actually, he's not well known, but he is ingrained in the music scene in Taipei. And I think most importantly, as somebody in the Taipei art scene, he was able to communicate how. Basically, he said, Taipei needs somebody like me. So I think that was the most important thing, again, establishing that I have credibility and that I already have sort of a plan. It's going to make sense for me to be there, and I can contribute. And so that was the key part, I think, of this letter of recommendation. Okay, and then my fourth letter of rec, this is really purely because of Paul's urging, because this connection has nothing to do with music. She doesn't know me at all within music, within the perspective of music. She's a good friend of my wife's, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit better. And she was basically writing a character reference. So it wasn't really about the music, but just about me as a person and my family as well, and why we would be great members of society in Taipei. And another thing to note is that she is a well-respected writer and researcher, publisher for Academia Sinica, which is like the prestigious research institution there. So she came with some weight, not in the arts community, but she came with some weight as a sort of as a respected authority in Taiwan. So one more time, just to go over sort of the culture and arts category for the Gold Card. I think there are 6 different categories that you can apply for when you're doing culture and arts. And of those 6, normally you choose one. I think for my application, I did have to select one, but I actually demonstrated some degree of proficiency in 3 areas: classical music, pop and commercial mainstream music, and then administration, management side of things. Those are 3 different pathways or subcategories within culture and arts, and I felt like I covered 3 of them to a decent level, and I tried to demonstrate that with my application. And to recap my application, I think the overall package really emphasized that I can bring something to the Taiwan music scene, to the art scene. I demonstrated that I had at least a plan in place to contribute in certain ways. I talked about sort of my Hakka heritage, talked about classical music and what I want to do working with classical musicians in Taiwan. And I also talked about sort of my pop music and songwriting with Taiwanese artists. So I did have a plan in place, and then I think the letters of rec, as I mentioned, kind of supported this and helped paint that picture more vividly. So I hope that helps to some degree. I'm going to reiterate what Paul said to me, which was to include everything. So he wanted me to include, of course, the degrees, work samples, photos of all my accomplishments, photos of me just with well-known people in the industry. I have lots of pictures with famous musicians, classical musicians especially, and I didn't include any of them because to me, the biggest insecurity I had was that most of my musical endeavors and accomplishments were 8 years or more in the past. And so I just felt a little strange, including things that were so old, so outdated, all these pictures, media mentions, and so I didn't. But I do think that it was good advice, and if you have whatever you have, just include it all, everything. If you're thinking about doing this and you want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to respond to emails, DMs, whatever. I'd love to be able to pay it forward the way Paul so generously reached out to me and helped me kind of get a better grasp and understanding of what it takes. So good luck to anyone else out there. You can also, of course, drop questions in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time.